Patterning can be really transformative. It brings us somewhere, and it brings you to a plane that's immediately not flat.
Hi, my name is Cynthia Leung. I'm the founder of Native Agents in New York City. Today, I'm with my friend, the artist and musician Farah Al Qasimi for Topical Cream.
Thank you, Cynthia and Topical Cream, for having me. This is Cleopatra. Welcome to my studio.
I'm really happy to be here in your studio, Farah, because I always think of this studio as like a playground or the inside of your brain. Maybe if you can walk us through how you use the studio. I think that's an important part of your process.
Yeah. I am a compulsive collector of objects and images in the sense that I'm constantly photographing. But what's nice about having a space, it's for me where I can kind of take what I learned from the real world through photographing it, through compulsively observing and witnessing things, and I can kind of explode them or crack them open into these other fictions and use them to kind of create constellations of narrative worlds that are in service of one another.
Are there other aspects of your practice that we can see in this studio? I almost feel like there's a lot of customs and like a lot of like myth-making Disney tropes.
I grew up in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates in the 90s, and there were and are fabric shops everywhere because people have their dresses custom made. So I like the image of these fabric shops with incredible store displays. That to me is just burned in my mind as like my first experience with the commercial world. This fabric, for example, this was like a Frankenstein of multiple different fabrics that ended up being a costume for my film Manar in 2019. So that lives here. The dolls I sew with all of my leftover fabrics that I don't use anymore. So I've made little models of my dog Cleopatra. I've made tiny spooky dolls that look like voodoo dolls that for some reason my nieces love and don't think are spooky. So yeah, it's just kind of, it's my playtime. It's what the inside of my head looks like, which is, I think, some people's idea of terrifying.
It feels very familiar to me and comfortable. I think it does remind me a lot of like a magpie aesthetic.
Yeah. I think also I'm always thinking about beauty product packaging and collecting it, and there's like a soap on the wall that's called Skin White. But I just worked on a wallpaper for a show that just opened that was just like a grid of beauty product packages that all have the word white or bright or light in them. So I collect and bring back to my nest, and over years I begin to put them together and to see these patterns. But it definitely feels like that level of I don't know, chaotic connection seeking that sometimes is visible to others and sometimes isn't.
Well, I feel like the way you install your works they're all in dialogue with each other. Do you work that out in your studio, like in advance, or?
Most of the time, no. Most of the time I just I hand print and cut everything here in the studio, and then I put them in a Ziploc bag, I put them in my hand carry, and I fly them to wherever the show is that I'm installing. And it's fun because it's a puzzle that's really solved only by being in a space, being in relationship to the scale of the image and understanding how it feels to look at it, from a certain distance.
It seems to me in your hands, photographs are a way of like connecting with people and like documenting things that are part of a culture.
Yeah.
Is there another way that you would describe it?
I guess what I'll say is I've met some of my best friends through photographing them. Something about going through that process together and agreeing on how to be represented or pictured to the world. There's a real opportunity for intimacy there. And I started photographing in Dearborn outside of Detroit, Michigan a few years ago because I was interested in the fact that it's got a huge, diverse, thriving community of Arabs, and I feel very, very disconnected from my own Arab Americanness because I grew up in Abu Dhabi. But going to Dearborn felt in a way kind of like a coming home, and some of the people that I met there have become like family to me. Even the way that I use the word home shifts based on where I am in that particular moment. And that's interesting to me, and I feel like the volatility or the flexibility of language is why I like photography so much, because we're dealing with these kind of units of what is generally believed as truth, but actually the way that we relate to the world is shifting all the time. And if we can kind of acknowledge that kind of stickiness or that complexity, then there's, I think, real opportunity for understanding and connection.
I was really interested in a series of self-portraits that I think you named them after, or you made a pun. It's sort of like, it ain't easy being seen, as opposed to Kermit the Frog, it ain't easy being green.
Yeah.
I would love to speak about how you approach that self-portrait.
So that's this series, and this is the portrait of me from that series. It was 2016, and Trump had just been elected, and a guy was driving by and stopped his car and started yelling slurs at me and telling me to go back to my own country. Finally, he drove away, but I remember the feeling of it was so conflicted, because there were both very loud feelings where I wanted to be as invisible as possible and just be swallowed into the ground. Then I also wanted to be so large that I could step on his car. So I wanted to kind of play with that, and then I worked on this green screen character who does actually become invisible. I think this is a really interesting moment because I experience being an Arab American in a way that is very different from the kind of identity politics of my upbringing. And there was so much of that anti-Arab, anti-brown sentiment post 9/11. And we're really seeing it surge again right now with what's happening in Palestine. And the way that certain narratives have been weaponized to dehumanize Arabs, to dehumanize Palestinians, and the way that that's reverberating within the United States again is really, really troubling and really sickening. And I've experienced it firsthand, my family's experienced it firsthand. So this work is in the show Going Dark, curated by Ashley James at the Guggenheim, and it feels like, even though we've been working on this show for over a year, it doesn't feel like a coincidence that it's kind of making its way into the world again now. I try not to think too much about representation and identity politics in my work, because so much of identity is relational, and in the US, whenever we're asked to speak about identity, it's specifically in relationship to Western identity politics. And I don't want to participate in that most of the time, because I think that it can be a dead-end conversation. But I do feel that there is a significance to certain conversations around how people are represented and how media, like photography, is weaponized to dehumanize them and kind of depersonalize them. And I think that this work is a commentary from my own experience with that I think is important to show at this moment.
So we always end on this with this question, which is, so do you watch TV? And if so, what are you watching on TV right now?
I'm always watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Murder, She Wrote. I also just watched The Evil Dead from 1983. I love being scared. So I think that there's got to be two sides of the coin. It's a lot of flowers and roses and fruits and puppets, but actually I think there's the darkness too. So don't let the glitter fool you.